It's time for a chat with Pat.
And it is Thursday, so everybody knows what that means. It is time for one of my favorite people in the world, Joan Watson. Hello, Joni. How you doing today?
I am great. It's great to be back with you guys.
Yeah, well, it's always good to have you on. If you're just tuning in for the first time to the show and haven't heard Joni before, she is a speaker and an author, and we are talking about one of her books, Making a Pilgrimage, a Companion for Catholics. And Joni, I want you to know that this book has inspired me in many ways. I'm helping with the junior high thing in a few weeks. And as we were meeting, all of a sudden I thought the pilgrimage popped into my head. And I said, okay, this is going to be our theme.
I love it.
I know. You just keep inspiring us. Well, we're in the midst of chapter 7, a very dense chapter. And I think last week we were talking about St. Helen going to Jerusalem to find the true cross and how she knew which cross was the true cross. We kind of ended with this because there's a lot of kind of sarcasm around relics of the true cross, like, if you picked them all up all over the world, you could build a boat with them. Like they're saying kind of there's a lot of fakes out there. How do you respond to that?
Yeah, I mean, it's just one of those things that gets repeated and people think it's true,
Right. Right.
So I'd like to know how they can prove that, right? Because in most of the churches, I mean, there's some exceptions, like the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, and in the Church of Santa Croce in Rome. There's some exceptions where there's a bigger, piece, obviously.
Right.
But, in most churches where we have a relic of the crucifixion or the relic of the true cross, it's a tiny splinter.
Yes.
And so I would love to see this boat that they're going to build with it. But it's one of those things that's been repeated for 500 years.
Right.
Just to kind of discredit relics in general.
And we were talking last week about how kind of these sites were confirmed over time in the Holy Land. And can you kind of clue us in a little bit more into Constantine's role in kind of building these churches?
Yeah, so Constantine was kind of building his churches in Rome, we have him building the first St. Peter's. We have him building the Cathedral of Rome, St. John Lateran. We'll talk all about that when we get to the Rome chapter.
Right.
His mother's the one, Helen, like we talked about last week. His mother's the one that goes over to Jerusalem. And, some people are like, well, how did she do this? She brings a lot back to Rome. Mm-hmm. She brings the stairs, for example, from Pilate's palace back to Rome. And people are like, well, how'd she do this?
Right.
And I'm like, well, Rome had money, right? I mean, She was the mother of the Roman emperor, and so she uses she uses the riches of the Roman Empire to now serve the church, which is really beautiful. So there's a number of churches she builds in Jerusalem while he's building in Rome.
Okay,
and they kind of make this mother-son duo. The mother is probably a better Catholic, but I hope to join them both in heaven someday and ask them lots of questions.
Well, you mentioned somebody, and I'm not sure if I'm going to say this right, Joni, Egeria?
Yes.
Did I say that correctly?
Egeria. People say different things. And her name's actually spelled differently in different books. But I say Egeria, and she gives us one of the earliest accounts of really life in the Holy Land. It's a really, really important document that we have from her. There's some holes, and we kind of have to put some things together, but it's these observations of her travels, which make it a very valuable document looking at early pilgrimage.
When you read about her, what kind of information did she give that you found valuable?
Yeah, so she is probably a wealthy woman, of a Roman Christian woman, who details her pilgrimage, and it's the earliest travelogue that we have. So it probably is around 380, 390.
Okay.
And so it's super early. It's addressed back home. And again, it's the earliest travelogue that we have.
Okay.
And so she describes both the places and also the customs of those places. So the whole second part, again, there's some holes and we've had to kind of piece it together when we discovered it. But the second part is all about the liturgy in the Holy Land. And she kind of details the different liturgical moments of Holy Week.
That's cool.
And so beautiful to read and to see that many of the things she details are still happening today.
Wow.
That this isn't something that we've lost, but many of our Holy Land traditions, many of our Holy Week traditions that many of us just celebrated, the veneration of the cross, et cetera, the Palm Sunday procession, she's detailing that she participated in those things in Jerusalem in the late 4th century.
Wow.
And so it's just beautiful to see both the continuity of how we now celebrate those things wherever we are,
right,
whether we're in the Holy Land or not. But it's also a beautiful testament to celebrating the liturgy in the places where those things actually happened.
Yeah.
So doing the Palm Sunday walk on the roads that Jesus would have come in on the donkey.
Right.
And if you go on pilgrimage to the Holy Land, you can still make that walk. They still call it the Palm Sunday walk down the Mount of Olives. And traditionally, although it did not happen this year, very famously, it was not allowed to happen. Traditionally, the whole Christian community of Jerusalem still does that walk today. I have a friend who participated in it when she studied in Jerusalem, and she said it's incredible to walk in these places at the same time, in the same way as Jesus Christ.
Wow, yeah, I can't even imagine. And one of the things you also mentioned, because you mentioned these Holy Week liturgies, you talk about that obviously we can't add words to the liturgy, but we have an exception when we're celebrating in the Holy Land. Can you explain that to our audience?
Yes, this is one of my favorite parts of going to the Holy Land, to be honest. Everybody always says if you go to the Holy Land on pilgrimage, you'll never read the scriptures the same. And one thing I wasn't prepared for is that you also never celebrate the liturgical calendar the same. You never celebrate the feasts of the church the same because you've been to these places. And one beautiful thing in all the places in the Holy Land where these events took place, the language of the liturgy is changed. For example, when you read the gospel, when the priest proclaims the gospel, let's say at the Mount of Transfiguration, when you're in that church at the Mount of Transfiguration, the priest is proclaiming the gospel. He says, Peter took James and John up this mountain. And the words of the scriptures are changed because you're in the place. Right. Maybe the most famous example is at the place of the Annunciation, when they pray the Angelus, when they pray, the Word became flesh. And the cave of the Annunciation, they say, here. The Word became flesh, here. Wow. And it's so profound when you're at Mass, especially, one of the priests I went with, it took him by surprise every time. Wow. And so it's the words of consecration, it's the words of the Eucharistic prayer in, the Holy Sepulchre, in, the words are changed. It's the Nativity, the words are changed. And it would take him by surprise, and he would just start to cry. Yeah. He would just weep because it's so powerful to be in those places. That
is amazing. I can't even imagine. I can't imagine what that would be like. And let's kind of end our talk today about St. Jerome, and because he actually went to the Holy Land, and he did that right to do his translation of Scripture. Why would he go there? What did he learn from all of that?
Yeah, so Jerome is really fascinating because you'll have times where he tells people, don't come. And he'll have times he says, it's easy. It's just as easy to be holy somewhere else than it is to be holy here. Right. But then he goes and he makes his home near the cave of Bethlehem. And so if you go to the Church of the Nativity, you can go out into the cave where Christ was born, but next door is the Roman Catholic Church. And if you go underneath that church, you have the caves of Jerome, where he translated the scriptures. So he goes to be close to where the Word became flesh, to translate the scriptures out of the ancient languages into the language of the vernacular, Latin, and translates them there in the cave, living in the cave. Right. Pulls his friend Paula with him, and he gets to know the community there, so that he can better understand the Hebrew and Greek.
Joni, we could talk about him forever. I think he told people not to come because he didn't want a crowd. Thanks for being with us. We'll talk to you next week, Joni.
Thanks so much. God bless.
Bye-bye.